phone. Is he ready to go right now, guys? All right. Hey, Roger, can you hear me?
Owen Schroyer, great to see you. Great to be with you.
It's good to be with you as well, Roger. Well, what is on your mind today? We've covered the waterfront of news, and what is leading your stories right now?
Well, first of all, Owen, you show graphically why you are on the Mr. Stone's International Best Dressed list with a killer necktie. I'm very proud. I'm very proud of you. I of course, today am wearing this outfit, this hat, this terrific turtleneck, these shades. And when I wore it previously on InfoWars, a number of leftists attacked me, not understanding that it was a fashion homage to Bobby Seale, to Huey Newton, to the Panthers. I didn't like their ideology, but these guys looked great. You see, the problem with the left is they have no sense of style as well as no belief in America. There we go. You see?
Wait a second. I mean, wait, whoa. I've seen Roger. I've seen Chunk Yogurt. I've seen Chunk Yogurt hosting the Young Turks. I mean, the guy is clearly put together with that suit he's got.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I've loved watching you guys. I love. Here you go. You get another image. These guys had style, so it's a homage. Relax, leftists who. Oh my gosh!
Wait a second. A Donald Trump supporter paying homage to African American fashion? I can't even.
It's style. This is all about style. Anyway, I've enjoyed this. I love the Doctor. You know, if I do a remake of Back to the Future, he is the guy to kind of play that part. And you guys are bringing unbelievable products to the InfoWars store. I mean, as you know, brain force for me is almost a requirement given the high pace of beating back the Senate and House Intelligence Committees in my demand to testify, keeping track of the Seth Rich murder probe, which we're going to talk about a little later, following the president's trip 9 days abroad. That troubles me some. 9 days is a long time for the president to be out of Washington. But the stagecraft, I think, has been generally good, with a few problems we'll talk about. What interests me is the polling continues to show real intensity and support for those who back the president. See, they're not buying the mainstream media takedown, something they couldn't achieve at the ballot box, but they now seek to achieve through a deep state coup, a collusion indeed between the mainstream media and the left wing of the Democratic Party.
Roger, you know, I actually have a question for you. There is talks right now about obviously the leakers from the White House is a very real situation right now. I think that everybody's kind of recognized that. The leaks magically stopped as soon as Trump took off, right after the New York Times and the Washington Compost published their smear pieces right after Donald Trump took off. But then the leaks stopped. Now there's rumors that once Trump gets back to America, that some of these leakers have been identified and maybe on the way out. Do you have any intel on that?
Well, it is interesting that the leaking stopped when the president went abroad because, of course, perhaps the leakers were in the entourage. Perhaps those leakers are now back in Washington. We don't know for certain. On the other hand, there has been speculation in the newspapers that the president would bring in Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie as latter-day plumbers, guys in charge of finding the leaks. This is a terrible idea. First, I don't think either one of them could find their arse with both hands, as our friend Paul Joseph Watson might say. But secondarily, they're not attorneys. They have no law enforcement experience. This reminds me of G. Gordon Liddy and E. Howard Hunt. These guys will end up in jail. If the president wants to find the leakers, do what Lyndon Johnson did rather than Richard Nixon. Appoint a strong, independent law enforcement man or woman to head the FBI, someone like Ray Kelly, the former New York police commissioner, or someone like Judge Jeanine Pirro, and do this legally. There's awesome investigative powers in the Justice Department and the FBI. The law has been violated here. You see, the difference between Watergate and what we see going on with Donald Trump is there's no crime. Watergate began with a break-in. No one has yet proved the crime of Russian collusion, if that is even a crime. Brother Dershowitz says it is not. So what we're seeing here is an orchestrated takedown. You have talked about this ad nauseum, and I salute you for it.
Yeah, honestly, I'm getting sick of it, to be honest. And I was talking about today, I can't even imagine if you're Donald Trump, a businessman who's worried about the bottom line, you're handcuffed. You can't stop this witch hunt that's wasting taxpayer dollars, wasting resources, wasting time, because you're handcuffed. If you do that, they're going to claim you're a Russian agent. So they handcuffed him there. But, you know, you just mentioned the new FBI director, who I'm sure is going to be announced sometime soon. We don't know yet. But it is a very important hiring, I think, for President Trump, because if he gets the right person in there who gets work done and actually wants to drain the swamp, I think that gives President Trump a lot more operating room to get his agenda going without all of these false narratives being put out. But I'm just curious, was Joe Lieberman ever really being considered for this job?
Let's hope not. I mean, look, I'm from Connecticut. Joe Lieberman is a good friend of mine. We don't agree on much, other than the fact that he was a better U.S. Senator than Lowell P. Weicker Jr., a Republican, better a snake in the grass than an asp in the bosom, although that's unfair to Joe Lieberman, who I do agree with on some issues. But his closeness to Senator John McCain and the fact that he's a rock-ribbed member of the Washington establishment, the two-party system that has brought this country to its knees, the president needs someone who is not a neocon, not political, someone who will restore confidence. The New York Times keeps reporting that the morale at the FBI is low. They cite no sources because it's false. I've talked to dozens of agents who believe that James Comey politicized the agency. There was no rhyme or reason to many of his stranger decisions. He declined to pursue the obvious crimes of the Clintons. So I agree with you, this will be a pivotal decision. I should mention, because we're kind of under some kind of cyber attack here, I'm relegated to the cell phone, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the president's trip. I was very unhappy with the imagery of our president bowing down to get a medal from the Saudi king. You see, President Trump is a very tall man, and he's broad-shouldered, and much. I blame the handlers. I believe those in charge of stagecraft. I blame Reince Priebus for putting the president in a position to have a photo that the Muslim world can now use as some kind of propaganda. Put the king on a riser if necessary. It's Advanced Man 101. I think that the president's staff has disserved him. I note to you that he did not bow to the Saudis when he was first introduced to them. He did not refrain from calling Islamic terrorism what it is in his remarks in front of his Saudi hosts. And many Americans, myself included, realize that a nuclear Iran is a problem for both of our nations. And while the Saudis do play a double game, and they did finance the attack on America, we will have to bring them to account. But first, we must take care of the threat of nuclear annihilation from a bunch of lunatics in Iran.
Yeah, and I wish that Trey Gowdy was willing to take the FBI director position. Apparently he's not, for the reasons of the way he just grills other politicians, like the way he grilled Brennan last week. But, you know, it's interesting. I think that the reason why Trump went on this trip was to prove he wasn't an isolationist and that he's willing to take his message abroad, which I think that he did actually get those two things done. But Dr. Group actually had a question for me, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Do the Democrats really think that they can impeach Donald Trump?
Well, I think that there is a subset of the far-left Democrats, abetted by their compatriots in the mainstream media. You know, in the next segment, I expect to talk extensively about the many comparisons of what happened to President Richard Nixon, who was in fact taken down in a similar coup for similar reasons. Nixon was committed to peace in Vietnam, peace with the Russians, peace with the Chinese, He cut a strategic deal for the limitation of nuclear warheads, opened the door to China. And the deep state was deeply opposed. Now Donald Trump stands up for détente and peace with the Russians rather than war over Syria, and we attack his patriotism and scream for impeachment. We'll get into that. In the meantime, patriots, I just got my fluoride-free blue toothpaste from InfoWars. This stuff is unreal, and I commend it to you in the fight for freedom. You can back InfoWars, back the fight against censorship, help us compete, and grab the audience that's falling off of Fox News by the second as they, quote-unquote, move to the center. I'll be right back. You're at the right place. InfoWars. Many thanks.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. Owen Schroyer here momentarily as we're about to be joined again by Roger Stone. He's got more breaking news. But this is just breaking right now. Manchester bomber Salman Abedi's father and brother have been arrested and linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Okay, so a pattern is forming here. Let's recall that the Manchester bomber traveled to Libya before this happened. And let's recall that we had multiple warnings from people, and he was known to authorities in England that he was indeed behaving strangely and may possibly do something like blow up a bunch of kids at an Ariana Grande concert. So now his fathers and brothers have been arrested and linked to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So my question now is, and I'll bring this to Roger Stone, are the people in England and Europe finally fed up? Are they finally willing to do something, Roger? Are they finally willing to put aside political correctness and do something to protect their homeland?
Well, I think the people are more than ready, Owen. The question is not the people. The question is the elitist global leadership, globalist leadership of a number of those nations. I had dinner last night with Tony Fabrizio, probably the foremost Republican pollster in the country. He recently returned from France, where he was working with Madame Le Pen. And the mainstream media there, like here, seeks to suppress popular sentiment. But I think in Germany, in France, in Belgium, the people are tired of swarms of Arabic youths pillaging, raping, assaulting, bombing, stealing, defecating in public fountains, destroying public property, turning over and burning police cars,
taking taxpayer dollars.
It is what is driving the reform across the country. It is what elected Donald Trump. It is what scored in the referendum in Italy not long ago. It is what gave us Brexit. It is it would have won France, but for problems that I think relate to the fact that the majority of French voters disagreed with the candidate who won. The majority of French voters, by large margins, agreed with Le Pen, but she was stigmatized, and the connection to her father, who she is not, but who retains very high negatives, I think, cost us that race, cost the forces of freedom that race. Well, I pray for the French people.
That is such an excellent point, Roger, and it can be proven because, look, we see people do this on the streets of America. You walk up to a Trump hater or a liberal, and you tell them all of Trump's policies, but you just say them, you know, kind of in passing or just in general, or say, hey, these are Clinton's policies, but you say Trump's policies, they agree with all of them. But yeah, it's the stigmatism, Roger.
It's the exact same phenomena that we have seen. Well, Owen, I want to talk about what I think is developing as the most interesting congressional race, perhaps in the country. Deborah Wasserman Schultz, right here in Florida, caught red-handed stealing the Democratic nomination from Bernie Sanders, busted by the people at WikiLeaks, the journalists at WikiLeaks,
fired,
who published this sordid tale. Now, 4 years ago, Tim Canova, a Bernie Sanders supporter, challenged her in the Democratic primary and he raised a significant amount from the grassroots to finish with a very strong 43%. In the end, Wasserman Schultz was able to win because she held on to the so-called condo commandos who deliver a very large and essentially bossed senior citizen vote of older voters. She won among Jewish voters, Catholic Democrats, while her opponent won among progressives, liberals, people of color. Mr. Canova has indicated that he will have a rematch. Now, Carla Spalding, a Haitian, a registered nurse, a woman of great character, has emerged to seek the Republican nomination in this district. And on June 10th, she headlines a rally outside the local affiliate, Channel 10, a non-censorship rally. So this is a race to watch. We're going to be following it very closely here at InfoWars because Deborah Wasserman Schultz deserves the challenge she's about to get. Well, as Cary Grant might say, Julie Roginski. Wrong. You see, we do respect Seth Rich's parents' request for privacy. Privacy is very important, but truth is more important. Now, let me say several things about the Seth Rich matter that need to be said. Many of you know the topic of Seth Rich has turned radioactive almost overnight. The amount of energy being expended by the left to bury this issue and to end any questions and to try to chop off the legs of anyone associated with it is obvious. Suddenly, the topic is supposed to be off limits. Now, there is a good bit of information out here that is disinformation. A email of John Podesta where he is quoted as saying, let's make an example of the leaker, and relating that to Seth Rich is a trap, in my opinion, because that email was addressed at a much different time to Joel Benenson and Robbie Mook back in February of 2015. It had to do with potential members of the Hillary campaign in the finance department who were quoted in the press. This, I think, was used to discredit certain critics on the Seth Rich question. I don't base my suspicions about Seth Rich on this email. The important thing to remember is this. Mr. Rich headed a division of the DNC. He was not a low-level IT employee. He was in charge of the division from which documents very clearly were purloined or hacked or turned over and showed up on WikiLeaks. None of the accuracy or the authenticity of those documents has been challenged by the mainstream media. When we learned that the DC Metropolitan Police did not question the bartender or any of the employees in the establishment where Mr. Rich was last seen, when we learned that they did not request the security camera footage, when we learned that a DNC crisis manager and fixer is now, I believe, still working for the Rich family, when the Washington Post, the official House organ of the Central Intelligence Agency, the voice of the two-party duopoly of neocons that have taken this country down the crapper, tells us that we can't question what happened out of respect for the family's privacy. Well, as I said earlier, as much as I have sympathy for anyone over the loss of their son, the truth and where it leads is a key question. Mr. Bauman, who is representing the parents, according to some, is an unwanted interloper, while others believe that he is assigned to handle the rich family. Bauman is a professional Democratic crisis public relations consultant in Washington, D.C., and has been a frequent critic of Donald Trump. Well, it is interesting that the DNC has taken a little public action in trying to track down Mr. Rich's killer, but now suddenly they're committing to stopping and dedicating resources to the cover-up and attempts to make this story go away. And while calls from Seth's family for respect should be heeded, it is also safe to say that his family, above all, should want to know what happened on that fateful night when he was murdered, taking 3 in the back. It is only natural for his family to want to know what really happened. We are in a situation in which Kim.com put forward a nothing burger, now a founder of Mega Uploads, a notorious hacker with a website famous for distributing pirated versions of copyright works. In 2012, the federal government, in tandem with several other agencies of international law enforcement, raided Mr. in New Zealand, where he had been living, arrested him, and seized all of his assets. Since then, Kim.com has been fighting extradition to the U.S., and just this past February, he lost his last New Zealand appeal. He's now being processed for extradition. It is entirely possible that Kim did not do himself any favors by injecting himself into the Seth Rich narrative and debate. Sadly, he has offered no new revelations backed by substantial proof last week, and over the weekend, he sadly revealed he has nothing of substance to add to the vital search for who murdered Seth Rich. Except for some secret information that he now says he will only provide to the FBI director, former FBI director, new special counsel, Mr. Mueller, in exchange for immunity and safe passage from New Zealand to the USA and back. I fear that this was a ploy to get another chance at fighting his case here in the United States, while a free man living the high life and not in a federal prison cell. I was sorry to see Sean Hannity and others in the alternative media community buy into what was most likely a ploy which had the net effect of distracting the American people from the inexorable need to know whether Seth Rich was assassinated for political reasons. The British diplomat Craig Murray, a man of impeccable integrity and excellent reputation, says that he was in touch with Rich and that Rich passed to him certain documents in a parking lot near American University in Washington, D.C. It is also notable that Mr. Rich had, without any question, access to the material in question. Donald Trump must tell his FBI director, a person who should be of non-political background, a law enforcement person, a man or a woman who will put politics aside and get behind the effort to take this investigation from the Metropolitan Police of the District of Columbia and conduct it in a professional manner in which no stone is left unturned. We have seen the private investigator initially hired by the Rich family. He is an African-American of excellent reputation. His contacts within the D.C. Metropolitan Police are first-rate. He is correct in my view that Rich's computer, his PC, contained evidence that he was in touch with WikiLeaks, Fox is a conundrum of boiling internal politics. You see, the Murdoch sons would like Fox to become the Sky Channel, and thus Fox backed off what I believe is indeed an accurate early report that some 40,000 documents went from Mr. Rich to WikiLeaks. I believe Sean Hannity knows it too. And I'm disappointed that Fox has undercut one of their leading conservative commentators and a staunch supporter of President Trump. Indeed, we are only beginning the question of Mr. Rich and who murdered him and why. I'd like to know. Wouldn't you? Meanwhile, the president is abroad. Now, a 9-day trip, I think, is another example of poor staff work by the people around the president. Just the same, the stage craft is good, and the president is having a most successful trip. When he returns, he will be confronted again with the partisanship at a fever pitch, and many on the both sides of the aisle seeking to get their mugs on TV with false accusations of treason and collusion with the Russians. This past week, I complied with a U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee request for documents. I turned over all documents regarding a very specific issue area pertaining to Russia. I have it on good authority that Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman for Donald Trump, did the same. And I reiterate my desire to testify in public before the Senate or the House committee. See, it's time for the Feinsteins, the Frankens, the Warners, and on the House side, the Schiffs, the Swalwells, the Spires, to put up or shut up. Don't accuse Paul Manafort or Roger Stone of treason. We may be tough and sharp-elbowed partisan political operatives, but we are not traitors to the United States. And the insinuation that we are rankles against your constant phony claim for civility in politics. And it will not be tolerated. Now, General Flynn may choose to plead the Fifth. That is not, in our system, necessarily proof of guilt. And the general's legal strategy and his public relations strategy, a bit of a mystery to me, I must say, is up to him. But as for me, I want to address the fake question of whether I knew about John Podesta's emails being hacked in advance, a lie, proven to be a lie by factcheck.org, hardly a right-wing organization, and I want to dismiss the question of whether I had specific advanced knowledge of the content of the incredible information that WikiLeaks dumped on the American people, indeed the world, in October. The idea that I colluded with Assange, the idea that Assange is a Russian asset, the idea that Guccifer 2.0 works for the Russians is intelligence agency Obama appointee poppycock nonsense. I say again, when the agencies use the word assessment, let your BS detector go up. That means they know nothing. That means they're telling you what fits their narrative, not necessarily the truth. And I applaud the appointment of a special prosecutor. I have grave reservations about Mr. Mueller and his wife, a high-powered attorney, who have obvious connections to the Clintons and other power players in this drama. I am hopeful Mr. Mueller can run an impartial investigation. He did, after all, tell George W. Bush that his metadata collection program violated the U.S. Constitution. We are at a crossroads where the parallels between former President Richard Nixon and Donald Trump are indeed manifest. You see, Nixon ended the war in Vietnam. He opened the door to China. He reached a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets. And we now know that the Watergate burglary team was infiltrated by the CIA. We know that the judge in the Watergate burglars case, John Sirica, was meeting ex parte with Watergate Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox and Leon Jaworski. We know that the Washington Post was well aware of a complex Pentagon spying operation inside the Nixon White House, where documents were being purloined from National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger and the president, copied and sent to Admiral Thomas Moore, the head of the Joint Chiefs, in violation of law. We know that Richard Nixon was taken down because he was a peacemaker. Now, yes, he gave them a sword. There is no question. But Donald Trump, who has roused the passions of the silent majority and the forgotten Americans like no president since Richard Nixon, is now under assault from the same deep state sources. The FBI, the CIA, the Washington Post, and the political intelligentsia manufacturing lies. The president disclosed classified information to the Russians about ISIS using laptops for bombs and getting them on planes. Well, I believe that appeared in 100 newspapers across America. That story is a fabrication that is meant to discredit the president. And then there's the New York Times. All the news that's fit to print, embellished with a left-wing tint. Mr. Comey has a memo saying the president tried to impede his investigation. Who has seen such memo? Oh, a person told a reporter on the phone and read from it. Bourgeois. That's journalism? No, that's a hit piece by the New York Times to take down and destabilize Donald Trump because he challenges the globalists and the New World Order. I'm Roger Stone. You're at the right place at InfoWars.com. Help us in the fight for freedom. Go to the InfoWarsStore.com and look at the incredible First Amendment-oriented T-shirts. Yes, Donald Trump, Trump-Pence 2020. Donald Trump is my president. And of course, the iconic the iconic Bill Clinton rape T-shirt featured in Time magazine, put on the map by Alex Jones and the Patriots here at InfoWars. You can both help us in the fight for freedom, and you can beat back the war of censorship being launched against us by the tech left and their buddies in the Democratic Party by going to the site and ordering these fine products today. I'll be right back. I'm Roger Stone.
Down on the shackles.
And that is your genuine roots music, the blues of the Delta. Great stuff here at InfoWars.com. Again, I want to let patriots and freedom lovers across South Florida know about the rally, which is June 10th here in Fort Lauderdale. We have the information we're going to put up on screen here for you for a moment. Now, the purpose of this rally is to demonstrate against the efforts by the tech left to censor patriotic Americans and alternative media outlets, which are today are all universally under assault. We are seeing the tech left monkeying with the algorithms of InfoWars and Breitbart and the StoneColdTruth.com and StoneZone.com. The liberal fascists are orchestrating an attack on conservative leaders like Alex Jones and Bill O'Reilly and others in an attempt to censor us, in an attempt to silence us. You see, they can't argue on the merits, so they drop back to Stalinistic censorship, the kind of tactics used, well, I would say by Adolf Hitler, but we have a saying, when you invoke Hitler in an argument, you're losing it. So we won't go there. I also want to point out that I will be headed to Austin. But before I go, on the 29th, I headline a online Skyped appearance for John F. Kennedy's 100th birthday. That's this Memorial Day, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And we have an incredible all-star lineup of alternative researchers and other experts on the Kennedy assassination, the last deep state takedown of a president, the first one really, before Richard Nixon, and exactly what, in a different form, the critics of Donald Trump may have in mind. I pray for the president's safety and that of his family every day, and you should join me in that. Again, I'd like to pull up the details for the June 10th rally, if we may, because it's important to have a turnout of patriots. It is at the important juncture in the fight for freedom. And as I indicated, Carla Spalding, the dynamic Republican candidate for Congress here against Deborah Wasserman Schultz, will speak. We will put this up online. We seem to be having a technical issue regarding these terrific details. But join us June 10th. Mark it on your calendar. You can go to stonecoldtruth.com to get the details of where and when you must mass to help us mount a voice against censorship, against the tech left, against twisted little freaks like David Brock, who use their bots to try to silence us in the fight for freedom and a free press, the First Amendment. Make no mistake about it, folks. When InfoWars and Breitbart and the Stone Cold Truth and Daily Caller are under siege, it is a fight to strangle the movement that elected Donald Trump and can make America great again. I'm Roger Stone, sitting in for Alex Jones, and let me say, fight the power.